He slammed his clipboard shut and stormed out. "This kid's wasting my time." That was July 1954, inside a tiny Memphis studio, where a 19-year-old truck driver named Elvis Presley had just been told he'd never make it. But what happened after that walkout would flip the music world upside down. The summer air in Memphis felt heavy that night, thick with cigarette smoke, sweat, and the smell of burnt coffee. July 18th, 1954, Sun Records, Union Avenue. It was past midnight, and the ceiling fan ticked like a lazy metronome. A 19-year-old truck driver named Elvis Presley stood in front of the mic, his hands trembling around the neck of his cheap acoustic guitar. He'd saved for weeks just to buy a few hours of studio time. To him, this wasn't just a session, it was a chance, maybe his only one. Behind the glass, Sam Phillips, the studio's owner, adjusted the dials. Beside him sat a visiting executive from Nashville. Mr. Harper, grey suit, slick hair, and a gold tie pin that gleamed under the yellow light. He wasn't impressed. He'd heard a dozen kids like this before, nervous, southern, hopeful. Phillips nodded. "All right, Elvis, let's hear what you got." The tape hissed, the mic crackled, and Elvis began to sing. His voice was soft, uncertain. He started with a slow ballad, something safe. Halfway through the first verse, his pitch wavered. He lost the rhythm, stumbled, then tried to recover. But the confidence was gone. The Nashville exec sighed loudly. He leaned back, eyes rolling. "Is this it?" he muttered, not quietly enough. Elvis heard it. Everyone did. For a second, he froze. Then the strumming stopped. Silence filled the room. The air conditioner clicked off, leaving only the faint hum of the tape reel turning. Phillips rubbed his face. "Let's take 5. But before anyone moved, Harper stood up. He grabbed his clipboard, snapped it shut and said, "I told you, Sam, you can't make lightning out of a truck driver." Then he walked straight out the door. The slam echoed down the hall. Elvis didn't move, didn't blink. The dream he'd carried since childhood felt like it had been crushed in a single sound. That door closing, Sam avoided his eyes. Marion Keisker, the studio assistant, offered a sympathetic smile. "Don't mind him," she said softly. "He doesn't hear what I hear." But Elvis just looked down at his hands, calloused, trembling. He whispered, "Maybe he's right." He started to pack his guitar, careful not to look up. Outside, a train passed, its horn low and distant. Inside, you could almost hear his heartbeat. Sam said quietly, "We can try again another day." But Elvis shook his head. "No, sir, I don't think I got what it takes." He left the guitar leaning against the chair and walked toward the door. Each step sounded like the end of something. Behind him, Marion glanced at the reel still spinning on the machine. A half-recorded song, half a dream. She reached out and stopped it, labeling the tape with a single word in pencil. Presley. No one knew it then, but that small act, that tiny label, would one day sit behind glass at the Memphis Music Hall of Fame. A plaque beneath it would read, "The night music almost lost its king." What would you have done if someone told you your dream wasn't worth another take? Would you have walked away too? Elvis stepped into the humid night. The neon sign above the studio flickered. Sun Record Company. He looked up, hands in his pockets, and whispered, "One day, I'll be back." The street was quiet except for the buzzing light and the sound of his footsteps fading into darkness. Inside the studio, Marion replayed the last seconds of his voice. It wasn't perfect, but something in it, a tremor, a raw ache, made her chest tighten. She didn't know why, but she left the tape on Sam's desk instead of throwing it out. And that decision, that one small act of faith, would soon rewrite music history. The tape hissed softly, waiting, and somewhere out in the Memphis night, a young man walked home believing he'd just failed. But fate wasn't done with him yet. The next morning, the studio was quiet. Dust floated in the sunbeams cutting through the blinds. Sam Phillips sat slumped over his console, coffee gone cold. The tape, labeled Presley, still sat on the desk. forgotten, like a dream after sunrise. He pressed play. A shaky voice filled the room. Imperfect. Nervous. But something about the tone made him pause. Then he sighed, rubbed his eyes and muttered, "Too rough, too green." He almost reached for the erase button. Marian Kaiska walked in just then, holding a stack of invoices. "Morning, Sam. Long night." He nodded. She noticed the tape. "That the kid from last night?" Sam shrugged. "Didn't have it. Shame, though. Kid's got a spark somewhere." She set the papers down. "Maybe it's still there, under all that fear." He chuckled. "Fear doesn't sell records, Marian." Outside, the streetcar rattled by and the building shook slightly. The reel kept spinning. Marian tilted her head. "Listen to that part again. Right here. Hear it?" He slides the note like he means it. Sam listened closer. The tone cracked, then soared for half a second before falling again. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. Before he could decide, the front door creaked open. Elvis stood there, hat in hand, unsure if he should even come in. Mr. Phillips? I forgot my guitar." Sam motioned toward the chair. "There it is, kid. Thought you weren't coming back." Elvis smiled faintly. "Didn't sleep much." He picked up the guitar, strummed a few strings, and laughed nervously. "Guess I owe you an apology for wasting your tape." Marian smiled. "You didn't waste anything." Then something unexpected happened. As he tuned up, Elvis began humming, not the slow ballad from last night, but something upbeat, loose, playful. A rhythm jumped out. "That's all right, Mama." Marian froze. "Sam, listen to that." Sam spun in his chair. "What's that you're doing, boy?" Elvis kept playing, tapping his boot on the floor. "Just fooling around. Don't stop," Sam said, leaning forward. Marian grabbed the mic cord, swinging it closer. The red record light blinked on. Tape hissed. Guitar strummed faster. No sheet music, no plan. Just energy. Sam shouted through the window. "Sing it like you mean it." And he did. Something electric filled the air. A mix of country rhythm, blues soul, and teenage rebellion. Marian's eyes widened. "Sam, this doesn't sound like anything I've ever heard." Sam's hands flew across the board. "Don't talk, we're rolling." Minutes later, silence. Elvis looked up, breathing hard. "That any good?" Sam couldn't even speak. He just hit rewind. When the playback started, everyone in the room went still. Even Elvis seemed stunned. The voice that came out of the speakers wasn't shy anymore. It was alive, raw and wild. Marian whispered, "That's it. That's the sound." Sam laughed, slapping the desk. "We found it! We finally found it!" Elvis blinked, confused. "Found what?" "The thing I've been looking for," Sam said. "A white boy who can sing like a black man, but honest, not imitation. You just gave us a brand new kind of music." Outside, a car horn blared. The city carried on, unaware that inside this tiny studio, the first spark of rock and roll had just been born. Sam leaned back, grinning. "We're cutting this to acetate tonight." Elvis looked terrified. "You think anyone will like it?" Sam smirked. "Kid, they're gonna lose their minds." Marian couldn't stop smiling. "See, Sam, I told you not to erase it. If she hadn't walked in that morning, that tape might have been wiped forever. A single second later, and the sound that changed the world would have vanished into static. What if every great discovery is just one breath away from being erased?" The reel spun down. Sam scribbled the title on a fresh label. "That's all right. Take one." He held it up, still in disbelief. "This is it, Marian. This is history." And somewhere deep inside, Elvis finally smiled for real. He didn't know it yet, but by the weekend, that same song would echo through every diner and drive-in from Memphis to Mississippi. The quiet kid who thought he'd failed was about to wake up famous. But first, someone had to take a chance on playing it. July 20th, 1954, WHBQ Radio, Memphis. The neon clock on the wall glowed 7:45 p.m. DJ Dewey Phillips, no relation to Sam, was slouched behind his microphone, tie loosened, cigarette burning low. He ran the city's wildest radio show, Red, Hot and Blue. His booth smelled of cola, vinyl and static. That night, he had a pile of new records beside him, but none of them felt alive. Then his phone rang. It was Sam Phillips. "Dewey, you trust me?" Dewey laughed. "Depends what you're selling, Sam. Just play this. Kid named Elvis Presley, truck driver. Don't say a word till it's done." He hung up before Dewey could argue. Minutes later, the door flew open. A studio runner dropped off a plain brown envelope marked Sun Records. "That's all right." Dewey turned it over in his hands. No label, no picture, just a small scribble. Elvis Presley. He placed the acetate on the turntable. The grooves caught the light like tiny rivers. "All right, Memphis," Dewey said into the mic. "Got something fresh for you tonight. Don't touch that dial." He dropped the needle. The speakers came alive with a raw, jumping rhythm that didn't sound like anything before it. A mix of country and blues, tangled up and reborn. Elvis's voice burst out, wild, playful, honest. Within 30 seconds, Dewey sat upright. "What in the world?" he whispered. Then the phone started ringing. One call, then 5, then 50. "Who is that?" "Play it again." My husband pulled the car over to listen. Within minutes, WHBQ's switchboard was jammed. Teenagers called crying. Truck drivers honked from the highway. A local waitress later said, "The whole diner stopped moving. We just listened." Dewey leaned into the mic, grinning. "Well, folks, seems we got ourselves a hit." He played it again, then again, 3 times in one night. Sam sat in his office, listening on a small radio, eyes wide. Marion stood beside him, tears in her eyes. Elvis? He was at home with his parents, Vernon and Gladys, eating dinner. The phone rang there too. "Elvis!" A neighbor shouted through the receiver. "You're on the radio!" He dropped his fork. "You're joking. Turn it up." The Presleys crowded around their kitchen radio, static buzzing. When his voice came through the speaker, Elvis went pale. "That's me?" he whispered. Gladys started crying. "That's my boy." In that exact moment, across Memphis, thousands of strangers were hearing his name for the first time, Elvis Presley. By midnight, the song was spreading faster than wildfire. Record stores were flooded with calls. One clerk said later, "We had folks banging on the door asking for it. We didn't even have it pressed yet." And somewhere in Nashville, in a smoke-filled office, Mr. Harper, the same executive who had walked out on Elvis, froze when he heard that same voice blasting from his radio. He turned the volume up, disbelief in his eyes. It was the same kid, the one he said would never make it. He poured himself a drink and stared at the wall. "What have I done?" The next morning, newspapers buzzed with the name, "Local Boy Shakes Up Memphis Airwaves." By the end of the week, Sun Records was buried in orders. The same tape that was almost erased now had the power to change everything. How many dreams are lost because someone didn't bother to press play? Dewey aired it again the next night, introducing it simply. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the start of something new. Name's Elvis Presley." Remember that, and people did. That night marked the first spark of what the press would soon call rock and roll. But Elvis still didn't know what was coming next. Fame, chaos, love, loss. It was all waiting beyond that radio hum. The city slept beneath the buzz of neon lights, unaware that the sound that filled their living rooms had just changed music history forever. By the first week of August 1954, the streets of Memphis had changed. Every radio, every diner jukebox, every passing car seemed to echo that same song. "That's all right." It wasn't just a hit, it was a fever. At Sun Records, the phone rang non-stop. Orders from Arkansas, Mississippi, even Chicago. Sam Phillips barely slept. Marion Keisker handled stacks of telegrams like a storm. And Elvis? He just tried to keep up. The shy kid who'd once whispered apologies now had reporters waiting outside his house. But fame still didn't feel real. He was still driving the same pickup, wearing the same thrift store jacket. One afternoon, a black sedan pulled up outside the studio. The door opened, and Mr. Harper stepped out, the same record executive who had walked out weeks earlier. He walked in without knocking. Sam looked up from his desk, amused. "Well, look who remembered my address," Harper forced a smile. Sam, I'll make it short. I was wrong. Marion paused, arms crossed. You don't say. Harper set down his hat. That record's all over town. My people want to sign him. Big money, real distribution, national airplay. Sam leaned back. You had your shot. The room went silent. Harper's jaw tightened. Don't be foolish. You can't do this alone. Sam smiled faintly. Funny. We already did. Across the glass, Elvis was tuning his guitar, unaware of the storm brewing behind the control room door. Harper turned toward him, voice softening. Kid, I'll make you a star. The kind that never fades. Elvis looked up, uncertain. Sir, I just want to sing. I don't need all that. For the first time, Harper didn't have a comeback. He picked up his hat and walked out, slower this time. No door slam, just silence. That night, August 10th, 1954, Elvis played his first major live show at the Overton Park Shell. Nearly 6,000 people packed the open-air amphitheatre. The air buzzed with chatter, cameras, and the smell of popcorn and perfume. Backstage, Elvis was shaking again. Sam noticed. You all right, son? Elvis nodded. Just scared, I guess, Sam smiled. Good. Means you care. When the announcer called his name, the crowd clapped politely. A few folks snickered. Another local boy. Probably another forgettable act. Elvis stepped out under the lights. The microphone squealed. The first few chords filled the humid air. Then something strange happened. His legs started to shake. Partly from nerves, partly from rhythm. The crowd laughed at first, then screamed. That movement, that accidental shake, became the moment. Women shrieked. Men shouted. Camera flashes popped like lightning. The band could barely hear themselves over the noise. Elvis didn't plan it. He just kept singing, feeding off the chaos, his voice cutting through the night like a spark in gasoline. By the second verse, the crowd wasn't just watching. They were living inside the sound. It was contagious, electric, unstoppable. When the final chord hit, the audience exploded. People jumped the railings, screaming his name. Some fainted, others cried. One man later said, "It felt like the ground moved." Backstage, Sam grabbed Elvis by the shoulders. "You did it, son. You got him." Elvis blinked, dazed. "Did I really?" Marion laughed. "You didn't just get him. You lit him on fire." A local journalist named Tom Moore scribbled in his notebook that night. Memphis just witnessed something new. They call him Elvis Presley, and the crowd has lost its mind. That quote would later appear on the front page of the Memphis Press Scimitar. Outside, the city buzzed like never before. Teenagers danced in parking lots. Radio DJs replayed his performance live from the field recordings. It was no longer about the song. It was about the feeling, that mix of danger and joy no one could name. Mr. Harper stood near the back of the crowd, hidden in the shadows. He didn't clap. He didn't move. He just stared, frozen, as thousands cheered for the boy he once dismissed. A soft rain began to fall. The lights shimmered on the wet stage. Elvis stepped back into the glow, bowing low. His voice cracked when he said, "Thank y'all. Thank you very much." He wasn't acting. He meant it. What happens when the world suddenly wants what you almost gave up on? That night, a few fans tore pieces from the stage curtain, keeping them like relics. One girl even fainted and was carried out clutching a paper ticket that later yellowed with age. It's still framed in her family's home. August 10th, 1954, the night Elvis moved. Back at the studio, Sam and Marion replayed the live recording, barely believing it was real. Sam whispered, "It's not just music anymore." Marion smiled. "It's history." And in that moment, the world didn't just discover a new sound. It discovered a new kind of courage. The boy who'd been laughed out of a studio had just made the crowd tremble. And somewhere in the dark, the man who walked out finally understood what he'd missed. By early 1956, America had changed, though most people couldn't explain why. Every jukebox, every diner, every living room now echoed with one name, Elvis Presley. He was everywhere. Posters in barbershops, headlines in every paper, girls writing his name on their notebooks like a secret prayer. And yet, when you stripped away the glitter, he was still that same polite boy from Tupelo, the one who said, "Yes, ma'am," to waitresses and carried his mother's photo in his wallet. In January, a reporter asked him, "How does it feel to be famous?" Elvis laughed. "Feels like I'm dreaming. I just hope I don't wake up." Behind him, flashbulbs popped like fireworks. But with fame came whispers. Too wild, too strange, too dangerous. Some said he was corrupting youth. Others said he was saving it. Either way, the world couldn't look away. At his Louisville show, 19,000 people packed into the arena. When the lights went down, the screams started before he even sang. He stepped to the mic, trying to speak, but the crowd drowned him out. In that roar, something became clear. Elvis wasn't just performing anymore. He had become a mirror. Every person saw a different reflection. The young saw freedom, the old saw rebellion, the lonely saw hope. And somewhere in that same crowd, standing by the exit doors, was Mr. Harper. He wasn't there to make an offer this time. He just stood silently, watching the chaos unfold. Teenagers crying, fainting, reaching for the stage as if touching him would change something inside them. When the band kicked into Heartbreak Hotel, the arena floor shook. Flashbulbs flickered like 1,000 stars, and Harper felt it. That wave of energy he'd once ignored. He leaned over to a security guard and said quietly, "They don't cheer like that for anyone else." The guard just grinned. "You're watching history, mister." Elvis dropped to one knee mid-song, sweat dripping down his face. He wasn't faking emotion. He was living it. Every lyric came from a real place, from years of feeling unseen. When he stood up again, the crowd screamed his name so loud it rattled the rafters. "Elvis! Elvis!" Backstage, Marion Keisker wiped her eyes. She remembered that trembling kid in the dusty studio, the one who'd almost given up. And now, here he was, shaking the world. Sam Phillips smiled beside her. "Told you he had lightning in him," she nodded. "Yeah, and he finally let it strike." Later that night, in the dressing room, Elvis sat alone for a moment. The roar of the crowd still echoed down the halls. He opened his mother's letter, the one she'd written before the tour. "Don't forget who you are, son. You don't sing for money. You sing 'cause God gave you that voice." He folded it carefully and placed it back in his jacket pocket. Outside, the fans were still chanting his name. Elvis took a deep breath, whispering, "I'm still that same boy, Mama." What would you do if the world suddenly saw you as something bigger than human? Would you chase it or run from it? For Elvis, the answer came quietly. He'd just keep singing. The fame, the lights, the screaming, they weren't his fuel. They were his mirror. He reflected the hunger of a generation that wanted to feel alive. Decades later, fans still talk about that show. How the air felt electric. How people left shaking, not from sound, but from emotion. A woman named Lydia Brooks, who was 16 then, kept her concert ticket in a diary. She wrote, "He didn't just sing, he showed us who we were." That diary sits today in a glass case at the Memphis Music Hall of Fame, next to a photo of Elvis kneeling on that stage, eyes closed, hand over his heart. He didn't know it yet, but moments like that would outlive him. Every scream, every lyric, every trembling note, they'd echo across generations. Because when Elvis sang, the world didn't just hear him, it heard itself. Years passed. The world moved on. But somewhere in Memphis, time never did. Inside Sun Studio, the same dusty microphone still stood on its silver stand. The same control board, the same faded walls that once echoed with a boy's trembling voice. If you visit on a quiet afternoon, you can still hear it. Faint, beneath the hum of the air vents, that ghostly hiss of tape. A small plaque by the door reads, "Recorded here. July 18th, 1954. Elvis Presley." That's all right. The tape that almost got erased now sits behind glass at the Memphis Music Hall of Fame. It's marked Take 2, smudged handwriting barely visible through the dust. Beside it, a yellowed photo of Marion Keisker, smiling proudly. She once said, "All I did was listen. The rest was destiny." Visitors still stop, lean closer, and whisper like they're afraid to wake a sleeping legend. Across town, a man in his 70s visits once a year. Grey hair, cane in hand. It's Mr. Harper, the same executive who once walked out. He stands in front of that glass case for minutes at a time, staring at the tape that changed everything. Sometimes he smiles. Sometimes he looks like he wants to apologize to it. One journalist once asked him, "Do you regret it?" Harper nodded slowly. "Every day. But if I hadn't walked out, maybe none of this would have happened." And maybe he was right, because sometimes destiny doesn't knock. It slams the door first. In 1977, when news broke that Elvis had passed away, crowds gathered outside Graceland in silence. Some cried openly. Others just held radios close to their hearts as "Can't Help Falling in Love" played through static. A bootleg tape from that day captured one fan saying, "It feels like the sky got quieter." Decades later, that same crackly recording was played during the Memphis Legacy ceremony. When it ended, the crowd rose in a standing ovation. For silence. Every legend leaves an echo. Elvis's just happened to sound like a heartbeat caught in vinyl. In 2023, a young musician named Aiden Cross came to Sun Studio to record his debut single. He asked to use the same mic Elvis did. The engineer smiled. "Still works." When Aiden finished his take, he asked, "You think anyone will care about this in 50 years? The engineer laughed softly. "Kid, someone probably said the same thing 70 years ago." That's how legacy works. Passed from trembling hands to trembling hearts. The tape clicks. The reel turns. And music, real music, finds its way back into the world. Today, fans from every country still visit the small room where it began. They run their fingers along the scratched floorboards, take photos beside the mic, and whisper stories their grandparents told them. Some bring old ticket stubs, others worn out vinyls with his face half faded. All of them say the same thing before they leave. He's still here because he is. Not in a mansion, not in marble statues, but in the pulse of every song that dares to sound different. What if that record executive hadn't walked out? What if Marion hadn't stopped Sam from erasing the tape? What if Elvis had gone home for good? History doesn't remember the walkout. It remembers what came after. The static, the spark, the sound that refused to die. As one old Sun Records technician once said, "The day that boy sang, the air changed shape, and maybe it still hasn't gone back." So the next time you hear that grainy recording, that shaky first verse that almost never survived, listen closely. Behind the rhythm and the twang, you can still hear it. A door closing, a world opening. Because sometimes one man's impatience becomes another man's immortality. If this story moved you, share it with someone who's ever been told they're not enough. Remind them that rejection isn't the end. It's the echo before destiny answers back. Because Elvis didn't just make music. He proved that failure can sound beautiful when you play it loud enough.